I still get really triggered when I read this sort of stuff because, sorry guys, I just get really triggered because I think, what bloody right have you got? What right have you got to do this? And how is it that this person is still working there? Truth or lie? Is Liz Kendall from DWP telling the truth? Or is she just another mouthpiece trying to fudge the figures on the back of disabled people? Well, I've got a lot to show you in this video from my own personal case against Department of Work and Pensions when I used to work for them as a disabled employee. I'm going to start pointing out their flaws because, quite frankly, when I hear people like Liz Kendall say disabled people are taking the mickey, Liz, start putting your money where your mouth is, because that's exactly what this video is going to start doing. Disabled people are taking the mickey. This is a direct quote from the mouthpiece of the Department of Work and Pensions, Liz Kendall, who is also the Secretary of the Department of Work and Pensions. Ironically enough, in the same breath, she also stated that she wants to give disabled people hope and get them back to work. As a former DWP employee myself that had to sue the Department of Work and Pensions for unlawful harassment and disability discrimination and failure to make reasonable adjustments for me in the workplace, I've got an awful lot to say about this, and in this video I'm going to be bringing you some screenshots from my own case where I'm afraid the only people taking the mickey is the Department of Work and Pensions, because if they cannot put into practice what they preach, why on earth are they legally being permitted to enforce this upon disabled people? Make sure you follow, make sure you subscribe, and lock in. It's going to be a good one. Now, I know Liz Kendall is saying that she wants to give everybody hope and get them back to work, but this is not about getting people back to work. It's being used as a counter device to reduce disabled people's disability benefits because they cannot work. This is a cost-saving exercise for the government, nothing else. And the reason why that probably is because they overspend. Even Liz Kendall herself has claimed on the taxpayers' expenses handbags, designer handbags for her own PA, amongst other things. I mean, we could do a whole video about the expenses of MPs and people like Liz Kendall, but I think I'll save that little golden nugget for you for another day. Let's focus on this. So as you can see from my own DWP application, when I applied for a work coach, I duly disclosed my disability. As a disabled person, that is clearly highlighted here. And then as a result of that, I was entered into the Department of Work and Pensions following various tests to prove that I was indeed disabled by their own merits under the Disability Confidence Scheme. And as we can see here, in their own writing, it says, a progressive condition is one that gets worse over time. People with progressive conditions can be classed as disabled. However, you automatically meet the disability definition under the Equality Act of 2010 from the day you're diagnosed with any of these things. Not that I am, but the point I'm making out here are progressive conditions. So when you go into a new job, especially an organisation like the Department of Work and Pensions, as a disabled person, and you go via a specialist scheme like a disability confidence scheme, there is of course certain processes that are meant to be followed. And those processes are clearly pointed out here in my probation letter, where it also keeps going on about all the things I'm meant to be doing as an employee. Now, the point I'm going to be making here in this video, because it relates directly to anybody that has anything to do with organisations or employers like the Department of Work and Pensions, is it's all very good pointing out our responsibilities, but what about yours? And when you don't keep up your side of the bargain when it is defined by law under the Equality Act of 2010, why isn't more being done about it? Now, DWP could never deny that I was disabled, or indeed that I did not make them aware of it. I've even completed things like their workplace adjustment passport. Not that it was ever looked at, updated or enforced once in the 2.5 years that I worked there for them, which again breaches their own policies. Just one vital piece of evidence that employers such as the Department of Work and Pensions, they make out that they're going through the processes. They get us to filling these forms, but they don't give us our rights. And disabled people have rights, the Department of Work and Pensions. We have rights. Here's another piece of my disability information, never kept up to date, or even as we can see, ever completed by my employer at the time, the Department of Work and Pensions. As a disabled employee, this should have been kept up to date every single time they had occupational health information. And why do you think they haven't done that? Because of course it states recommendations taken forward, which means that if it's there in writing, it means they have got to do something about it. And of course they don't want to do anything about it, because the minute somebody is disabled, it is my belief that they want to get rid of you as quickly as possible. Now, you may or you may not be aware of this, but when you're disabled and you're employed, you might require something called a disability trigger point. That means if you have a long-term health condition or something that is going to make you off work sometimes, like my conditions will require me to be off work sometimes, it means that you're given extra days of sick leave. And those extra days of sick leave are exactly so that these sorts of things don't happen. Written warnings, right? Because if you put someone on a written warning because they're on sick leave for a disability, obviously a disability, they can't help it, being on sick leave because of their disability, to actually put them in written warnings is considered unlawful. So that's why we have trigger points. Can you see here, my trigger points are not completed. Sorry, let me correct that. The trigger point I have been accorded here is a trigger point for a non-disabled person. But I'm disabled, as you can see from all the evidence. And in actual fact, trigger points are clearly outlined in the Department of Work and Pensions Employee Handbook, and also in the management section of their online portal. And I was managed by a number of different managers in the time that I was there. And every single one, I requested to every single one trigger points. I requested them verbally, and then I requested them about 18 times in writing. And as we can clearly see here, it says a disabled employee's trigger point is a reasonable adjustment which is intended to remove any disadvantage disabled employees may face by being expected to reach the same attendance as a non-disabled employee. And here lies the quest. It is my belief the Department of Work and Pensions don't accord the disabled trigger point because it makes it easier for them to fire you. And I know many other large organisations, the NHS and the police being just a few I have heard of, practice the same method. And when I say that, I have had so many people contact me, and literally the way they've been removed or fired from these organisations, and I know they're not just the only ones, is identical. It's a practiced path. I don't know if it's a practiced legal path, but it is definitely a practice path. I could literally put all of their messages on the screen and it would be copied and pasted. It would look like I'd copied and pasted the whole lot. It is incredible. Now, in my own condition, I've got a very bad musculoskeletal condition as one of my disabilities from being driven into at 60 miles an hour. And you can clearly see here from a screenshot of the Department of Work and Pensions own information about all of the advice and support I was meant to have got as a disabled employee. Ongoing focus on work can help with recovery. Trust me, you're not going to recover by broken bones. It is important to take early action in order to alleviate symptoms. There are many sources of helpful information on living with pain. Managers should also talk to the employee about how they are managing their condition out of work. Coping techniques could be imported into the workplace. Yeah, we can see how much DWP follow their own advice there. Next. Now, this is what's really important. When someone has a disability or an absence, you can see here the entire checklist. In fact, it's a process. Let me blow it up for you. As we can see here, we've got absence 1. Absence 1, there we go. This is the start of your employer getting rid of you. A little call, and then of course you will have an occupational health referral, and that's basically to see the things they kind of need to kind of mosey around, I would suggest. The second one, absence level 2, another little call, occupational health referral, and then you can see here aggregation letter issued. Other actions taken as a result of this absence. Then we've got absence 3, and then we've obviously got absence 4. Now, can you see here? It says here, note OHS referral. Note OHS referral. Now, in my case, I had OHS referrals, but DWP didn't follow any of the advice on it. As you can see, here is my occupational health referral report. In fact, it's not your occupational health report, not a referral. And it clearly states there that I am feeling stressed and unsupported at work. Nothing was done about that. The fact that I'd been actually referred to steps to wellbeing for stress and anxiety and under clinical counselling obviously was completely ignored as well by them. And I quote from the bottom of my report, it says, I have underlying health conditions where relapses in the future can occur, potentially leading to sickness absence, and because of that I am unable to predict the frequency or duration of any future absence. So you would think that I would be given maybe a bit of support, wouldn't you, at work? But in actual fact, I was given none. In fact, when I realised that DWP, my employer then, weren't following their own policies, I raised a grievance. And these were the results of the internal investigation. Incident 4, there were many of them. Alison states she has a high number of customers with complex needs and is not supplied the time to deal with these effectively. Jenny states that she holds fortnightly caseload reviews with her team, but hasn't done with Alison, as Alison had not blocked her diary. Jenny then goes on to state that Alison's caseload is no more complex than others on the team. The investigation report that there was insufficient evidence to class this as bullying and harassment behaviour. However, I find that in this instance, Jenny has treated Alison unfairly. Jenny was aware that she hadn't reviewed Alison's caseload with her, however, took no steps to rectify this. If Alison was too busy to block her diary, Jenny should have taken the initiative to do this herself to give her the time to review Alison's workload. I am unsure how Jenny can conclude that Alison's workload is no more complex than others if she has not undertaken a caseload review. However, I am unable to conclude from the investigation report and evidence provided whether Alison is the only member of Jenny's team that hasn't had a caseload review. I cannot therefore uphold this element of the grievance, but recommend remedial action is put in place urgently to ensure regular case reviews are taken. And this is a problem we have. Jenny, by her own admission, says that she did do regular case reviews on everyone, and the investigation found what actually she didn't. With me, but they couldn't actually decide whether they did it for everybody. But the complaint wasn't about everybody else's, whether the caseload review had been done for everybody else. It was about whether it had been done for me. And that's how they sidestepped the first element. But what is really relevant is the next part of the grievance, which was upheld. And this is where Liz Kendall really needs to take flipping note here. In fact, can someone just send it to her? Now, I'm going to blow this up on the screen, but I really want you to think about what Liz Kendall and DWP are trying to do with the disability benefit reform, and actually what I went through. Now, this is like at the very start of a 2.5 year long battle, because I can tell you what I'm about to read you is nothing compared to what I went through afterwards. But it's just to give you a little idea of how wrong the Department of Work and Pensions are, how wrong many employers are, and how 2.5 years later they went to court with me, put me through an incredibly stressful employment tribunal process. Granted, I took them to court. However, this could all have been avoided because they were the ones at fault. I have linked these 3 instances together as they all relate to Alison's health and the inaction of the leadership team in said place. Alison declared when joining the department, so that is the Department of Work and Pensions, that she had a disability. The department has clear guidance for line managers to take when recruiting someone with a disability, and this was not followed in Alison's case. I just want you, just remember those words. This was not followed in Alison's case. Her line manager would have had a copy of the report produced by SSCL, it's like an HR department, and would have needed to call her to discuss what reasonable adjustments may be needed and, if any, complete the workplace adjustment passport. The SSCL report should have been retained by her line manager in her personnel file. It would appear that none of the leadership team have a copy of the report. None. They did have a copy of it, but they just chose to get rid of it. Jenny was aware of Alison's health condition and put some reasonable adjustments in place following their initial one-to-one. I'm going to say those reasonable adjustments was just for me to complete an online desktop disability assessment. So that's just, can you just tell me how far you are from your screen, how far you are from your mouse or keyboard. So it wasn't really her putting them in place, was it? It was just completing a software questionnaire. The investigation report is not clear as when this happened. The investigation report states that Alison raised concerns with Jenny following her DSC, and Jenny advised her to make some adjustments and come back to her. Alison raised further concerns, however, see grievance investigation, only after Alison requested it herself. Now you might be thinking that's the last of it, but no. And this is what happens next with employers. So if that wasn't bad enough, let me show you what happens next. So when you know your rights, when you try and have your rights advocated as a disabled person, this is what happens next. Alison had raised concerns about stress. However, there is no evidence that she was advised to complete a stress self-assessment, nor that any part of the department's stress at work policy was followed. Now, my question here is why? Why is there no evidence? If these are processes in the Department of Work and Pensions that are meant to be followed, why is somebody not checking that this is being done? I mean, you could ask the same here with my probation review form. As you can see, that wasn't filled in either. That was the first one. But do you know what? Not a single probation review form was done for me. Not one in 6 months. Here they are all here, empty. Anyway, let's get back to the result of the internal investigation. Following a period of sickness in October, Alison discussed feeling bullied in her welcome back discussion. Jenny refused to include this in the welcome back discussion write-up. These concerns should have been recorded and Jenny should have had taken action to resolve them. But of course, she didn't write them up because she was the bully. So how can the bully take action against themselves? And again, that is another point I raised later on in other grievances. Floor 2 was closed in December due to a lack of G4S staff. This is not a one-off incident and the site had issues in the past ensuring that there are enough G4S staff to keep the floor open. Alison was asked to move to another floor. No arrangements were made by the leadership team to plan who was moving there. And nobody assisted Alison despite her walking with a stick on the day. As a member of staff with a disability, additional thought should have been given to Alison before asking her to move, and she should have been offered help and support if she needed it. I conclude that Alison had been unfairly treated in incidences 6, 10 and 12. These elements of the grievance have been upheld. Now I'm going to paint the scene, right, on the day, because trust me, it was a flipping ghastly one. I used to work in a massive, almost like it was a call centre actually, and the building was like an old call centre. So there were nearly 100 desks on every floor. We occupied, or the place I worked occupied, 3 floors. So I walked past with a walking stick, my handbag, my coat, my laptop, my keyboard, my mouse, trying to juggle it all, as you can imagine, round the back of desks where people were trying to sit, 100, or with a big black walking stick, 100 on the ground floor, 100 on the first floor, and by the time I got to the next floor, I was in tears, I was dropping stuff, I was hot, my knee was absolutely killing me. In actual fact, I ended up being put on sick leave because I then pulled my back out because I was having to walk like so higgledy-piggledy, trying to balance my handbag, my coat, hold my computer, the walking stick, move in and out of, like, you can imagine. You can imagine. So when we're talking about bullying and harassment, should the question not have been, well, if apparently there is no bullying problem in this office, how is it that a disabled person with a big black walking stick can walk past nearly 300 desks and nobody helps her? Nobody offers to give her a desk. Because I asked, can I sit here? There's a desk free. No, you can't sit there. So-and-so's coming in at 2 o'clock. Now, the reason why that was because Jenny from the block we'll call her, had been working there for nearly 18 years. And I wasn't her first victim. In fact, I've got a little screenshot from some text messages from another lady that she did this to. Unfortunately, this person, well, let me just show you. Now I've removed this person's her face. That isn't her full name, obviously, so she can't be identified. But this person actually used to work with the same manager that started on me when I worked at DWP. Again, a very practiced behaviour. The lady whose face has actually been blacked out is a black lady, and she firmly believes that Jenny from the block we'll call her, was very racist. She was also heavily pregnant, this lady, Chantal, at the time. And Chantal had been left alone to work with an SO offender, which you should never be left alone. And also she shouldn't have been perhaps dealing with an SO offender because it's normally same-sex work coaches that deal with SO offenders for obvious reasons. Anyway, this is what she said when she raised a complaint. What happened over this, whilst I was signed off, they ordered me to a mediation meeting with Jenny, to which I refused. They hounded me and got Clive from Bournemouth, apparently, to attend with Jenny, best buddies at the time. Eventually, I agreed to attend and my rep wasn't there. It was just me with them. And the meeting was just a bullying fest. I just want you to imagine what that must have felt like. Disabled, pregnant, black person in a room on her own with two people who work and still work, I might add, for the Department of Work and Pensions, behaving in this way. Again, I reported them looking for anyone that would stick up for me and I failed. I shouldn't have never attended the meeting whilst signed off. Obviously, now being older and having run my own business, I know what's right and wrong. But at the time, I was a new mum, no support from family. So I was a great target for them. It's funny because I'm actually pretty much in the same demographic, apart from that I'm not a young mum, but on my own with my children. So no, maybe Jen's got something about single parents as well. She doesn't seem to like disabled people much. Anyway, eventually it got worse with harassment whilst I was signed off. She reported me for all sorts of stuff. It was crazy. And then I got a letter in the post saying that I had been dismissed for gross misconduct. Gross misconduct being I didn't attend her meeting. I try really hard when I'm doing this, but I have to say, right, that I get so triggered, even though it's just like it's years later now, I still get really triggered when I read this sort of stuff because, sorry guys, I just get really triggered because I think, what bloody right have you got? What right have you got to do this? And how is it that this person is still working there? There's 18 years between this incident Chantal's talking about and my own. 18! And I bet we're not the only people that have been through this. And I also got dismissed for gross misconduct. And I think part of DWP's plan, a practice plan, is that if we dismiss you for gross misconduct, you're not going to speak up about it because you're going to feel ashamed. I don't feel ashamed because you fired me for something I did not do. And you fired another disabled person for something that you shouldn't have done. Now, if it wasn't bad enough going through just having to deal with the Department of Work and Pensions anyway, when I was working there, at one point, a senior manager instructed a deputy to order my disability equipment. So I'm just going to be clear here. This was an adjustable desk, adjustable keyboard, mouse, a flexi arm, light touch, so I could just touch the screen and it would move, because otherwise they're like massively fixed and you need a really strong vice hand to do it, which I can't do because I've got a problem with my hand, and a few other things as well, including diary adjustments, etc, etc. All right, and let's bear in mind that this was for my reasonable adjustments. Okay, now this person had been ordered by a senior manager to do this, and this was her response. I'm extremely sorry, but due to pressure in my own life, I was not able to continue my support in this situation, which was ordering the equipment, as I have found this has impacted heavily on my own mental health and ability to complete my own work. If you feel that liaising with your team leader is not possible for you, then I will hand this over to another team leader on site. The team leader in question was Jenny Nye, so that's why that person there was asked to do it instead of Jenny Nye, because there was already the grievance in about the unfair treatment, which that deputy knew about. So people, they just all work together at this point, as you can see. One person refusing to help me and then using their disability, so it's all right for their mental health, to be taken care of, and it's all right for their mental health to be considered. But to this day, a question that I did ask in court, I would like somebody to evidence to me, really, how does ordering somebody's desk and keyboard affect your mental health? I just don't understand how that is an issue. But it was obviously made to be one. So the point is here, it wasn't the ordering of the equipment at all. It is just that this person did not want to be seen to be helping me because they were friends, obviously, with Jenny from the block. Or is it because she was also trying to set me up because the grievance against Jenny from the block had been upheld? Let's have a little look at this. Scaremongering, shall we call it? I call it just trying to fit someone up for something they haven't done, but let's have a little look. So first of all, let's just notice that Georgina, Jenny's deputy, had sent an email to Jenny on private. That's a big telltale sign already. That means it can't be flagged in the internal email box and cannot be read by anyone else but Jenny. Just wondering why she was doing that when she was reporting me to HR. So let's blow this one up, shall we? By the way, when you look at the date, this was like just a little bit after the grievance had been made against Jenny Nye. So Georgina, Jenny's deputy, had sent on private, as we can see there, a little email to Jenny where she had effectively reported me, Georgina had reported me to HR. Now pay very close attention to the wording of what Georgina, with Jenny's approval, so it seems, because she CC'd her in on private, let's not forget, to HR about me, and then I'll be showing you a little picture afterwards. So let's have a little look on how the Department of Work and Pensions support disabled people, especially when internal grievances are upheld because team leaders and managers have been found to have treated disabled employees unfairly because they haven't followed their own processes and policies for disability. Alison has been off work with a bad back for the last week and had a fit note to cover this. A colleague had requested to work from home and has only had one jab due to having contracted COVID twice and not allowed to have second jab until January. Also requires reasonable adjustments and equipment. Colleague has quoted Employment Law Section 44. How should we process with this? There's a lot of things that are not correct about this, but I will go into that in a moment. Fitnote states a trapped nerve, but colleague has released social media posts where she is dancing. Got that bit? Also stated on social media posts about working for or with the government. What should we do about this?